Hi guys, Miss Vega here. So normally this is the time of year we'd gather together, talk about summer reading books, and I would get to share with you my excitement for next year's community book discussion. Since we can't do it in person, I'm gonna make this your video. I'll try to make it as short as possible. My dog is probably gonna make some noise in the background. We're just gonna roll with it. So here we go. Starting in October, we've got a graphic novel up first called They Called Us Enemy. Super short, fast read. It's about George Takei, a famous actor's true experiences as a child growing up in a Japanese American internment camp during World War II. Fast, fun read full of very interesting history. Paired with that, we have a book called Internment. Once again, a super easy, quick read. And it's like sort of a dystopian near future where those same Japanese American internment camps are reopened again, except this time the USA is using them to lock up Muslim Americans. And the main question here is, what would you do? Would you stay silent and let it happen, or would you fight back? Moving into October, we've got what I like to call fairy tale month. So at first, we've got a book called The Prince and the Dressmaker, and it's like a retake on a modern fairy tale. What's really exciting about this book is it's being made into a musical by the same people who did Hamilton. Super light, fast, and it really deals with questions of like going after your dreams and identity. Would you go for your dreams even if it meant keeping who you are a secret? Partnered with that, we have A Curse So Dark and Lonely, and this is a retake on the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale, except it's unlike the Disney version whatsoever. Our Beauty is super like tough and resilient, and she's not really a damsel princess in distress whatsoever, and the Beast is a bit of a jerk, but I think that you'll like this reinvention of it. In November, we switch back into some heavier topics. This is the book I would recommend the most for people who just don't like reading. The title Heroine gives it away. We have a young high school female athlete who is in a car accident and is forced to have surgery, and she wants to get back in the game really quickly, and the way to do that is by taking the prescription opioids that her doctor gives her, and before she knows it, she's got a full-on addiction problem, and there's death, and there's sadness, and there's tragedy, and all the things that you would expect with addiction. Partnered with that, and this is for my people who love the true crime stories on Netflix. Like if you watch the documentary The Pharmacist, this is for you. So it looks at like how did the opioid crisis become this thing that it is in America. It looks at the Mexican cartel, it looks at the pharmaceutical industry, it looks at all the people who made tons of money off of this, and the millions of Americans who suffered as a result. In December, this is probably one of my favorite books on the list. You might recognize the title Just Mercy. A movie was made about it. But once again, if you're into true crime stories or like the Innocence Projects, people who have been convicted of crimes that they didn't commit, which I think is like a massive fear to think about being locked up for something that you didn't do or being framed for a crime. And the truth is that this is the reality for tons of Americans who are on death row, especially those who are poor or those who are marginalized and don't have the ability to fight back. And so this is a look at criminal justice system and death row, and I promise you, you'll never think about it the same after reading this book. Partnered with that is a piece of fiction. So if you read After the Shock Drops this year, this is a book by the same author, Randy Rebay. It's called The Patron Saints of Nothing. And our main character finds out that his cousin in the Philippines died, except his family won't tell him anything about it. They're super secretive. Eventually, he gets some grain of truth from the internet, finding out that his cousin had a drug problem, and that's why he was killed. Except that doesn't add up because the cousin he knew would never get messed up involved in drugs. And it looks about the way that the Philippine government fights the war on drugs, which is totally different than the US, and it raises some really important questions. Moving on to February. So this is a nonfiction book. I love it a whole bunch. So if you have questions about like racism and anti-racism and what does that mean, and you hear all these terms and you don't know where to start, like you want to do better, but you don't know where to start, this is a great book. It's not boring like a history textbook, but it looks at the past and it makes connections to the future. And it's written by, well, it's co-written by one of my favorite authors, Jason Reynolds, who writes some amazing easy to read, fast-paced stuff. Like if you want to be educated in America about race, this is where you need to start. Moving on to March, lightening it up, we've got a good old-fashioned murder mystery. So One of Us is Lying is a page turner, very fast, very easy read. 5 kids get scheduled for detention for some mysterious reasons, and by the time it's over, one of them is dead. And someone in the room had to do it. And so you spend the book kind of sort of investigating each person. Everyone's got a secret, everyone was hiding something, and it leaves you guessing up until the end about who actually did it. And there's a sequel called One of Us is Next. So if you already read that one, or you find yourself hooked on the genre like I am, this is like part 2, slightly new characters, some from the old book, kind of a big game of truth or dare gone wrong. Once again, super fast page turner. So if you don't like reading books, this is one I would go for. In April, so we're going into some classic mode a little bit. So let me just go one forward. So Pride and Prejudice is a classic. It's something that you would read in AP literature, but it's actually one of my favorite classics, and I don't say that a lot. In fact, if you want to read this book, I suggest starting with one of the many movies that have been made out of it. You can find them on Netflix or Hulu, but it's basically like one of the origin romance tale, like people judging each other, getting it wrong. Elizabeth Bennet, who's the main character, is like super modern for her time, and I just think it's overall a great romance. And I'll take you back one. So it's partnered with a book called Pride, which is a modern day version of Pride and Prejudice, set in current times with current issues, not so much Britain back in the day, but like modern USA. It's a romance, but it's great. And that takes us lastly to May. So we're ending off the year with another graphic novel called Genderqueer. And one of my favorite genres is the memoir. I love reading about other people's lives. I find it super fascinating, whether they're famous, whether they're not famous. It's like, I just want to know how other people have lived their lives. And so this one looks at gender and identity and what does it mean to be non-binary or asexual? And it helps you explore. And if you're new to the topic, or if you already know more, but you want to go a step deeper, it's great. Like if you want to be an ally, if you want to be an advocate, heck, if you're a human, this is a book for you. Super short graphic novel. And our last book, this one's really up there on my favorites too. It's called Ordinary Hazards by Nikki Grimes. It's a memoir as well. It's written in verse. So if you read Shout this year, verse novels are written in like short poetry form. And they're super fast, they're super powerful. It's almost like the author is just like vomiting all these emotions on the page and you get captivated. Nikki Grimes had a very traumatic childhood, a mother with mental health issues, in and out of like different households, abusive families, sexual assault. Like she endured so much to go on to become like a very successful writer. And her story is like super powerful and emotional. And I just can't say enough about it. So those are our community book discussion books. If one seems interesting, go ahead, read more about it on the internet. I suggest you give them a try. I look forward to reading them and discussing them all with you next year. Thanks. Bye. Oops.